From orbit, Earth appears seamless. No borders, no nations, no ideologies. Yet for most of human history, one narrow stretch of water has resisted every empire, every engineer, every dream of human. The Bering Strait, 85 kilometers of ice, fog, tectonic violence, and silence. Here, Asia ends. Here, North America begins. And for centuries, humanity asked the same question. Can the world be physically connected? This is not the story of a single bridge, tunnel, or railway. This is the story of an idea that refused to die. An idea born of empire, sharpened by war, delayed by fear, and finally forced into reality by necessity. To understand how humanity crossed the last gap, we must begin long before steel, long before electricity, long before the word engineering existed. We begin in the late 19th century, a time of global expansion and iron-will innovation. The moment when the world first truly dared to bridge the gap.
Space, time. Beringia, approximately 20,000 BCE, the height of the last ice age. A vast frozen plain stretches beyond the horizon. In this era, the maps we know do not exist. There is only the expanse. Before rails, before maps, before nations, there was a crossing. During the Ice Age, sea levels fell, the ocean retreated. What remained was Beringia, a land bridge wider than modern France. A new continent was waiting to be discovered. Men and women walk slowly, wrapped in animal skins. Children cling to their parents. This is the first infrastructure, migration itself. Small family groups, elders and scouts. They did not build bridges of stone or wood. They became the bridge. Dogs pull crude sleds. Every step is a gamble. Survival, curiosity, the fear of starvation is left behind. Humanity's first intercontinental connection was not made of material, but of footsteps and shared will. They walked into an unknown continent. A hunter stops, looks back toward Asia, then forward into the future. The crossing took millennia. It was a slow generational surge across the permafrost. Every stride was a blueprint for the future. Millennia later, engineers would return to this place with blueprints and steel. But the logic was the same, connection. The memory of connection was already written into human DNA. We do not believe, we do not doubt, we reconstruct. This was a civilizational gamble. Disaster is inevitable, collapse is optional. They chose to move forward. Scene transition, ice melts. Water rises. The great ice sheets begin to weep for a world they once held. The land bridge disappears beneath the waves. The first connection is severed by the tide. A continent is isolated. What was once a highway of nations is now a silent seabed. Successful infrastructure becomes invisible until it is absent. But the logic of the bridge survived. Failure is not the opposite of progress. It is its engine. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. These moments are the foundations of human structural resilience. We study these moments to understand when civilizations gamble everything on a single idea. Connection. The builders shape the future more than any ruler. Their invisible works hold the world together. The memory of the crossing remains. We are the architects of eternity, built on the footsteps of those who walked before us. From the 13th to the 18th centuries, the world was a canvas where empires raced to fill the voids. Civilizations grew and power flowed outward, yet one boundary remained stubbornly untouched. The Bering Strait, a gateway that no empire could successfully pass for generations. To the west, Russian explorers pushed to the land's end, only to be met by a wall of ice. It wasn't distance that stopped them. It was the sheer hostility of the physical world. Ice crushed hulls, fog erased the stars, and compasses spun uselessly near the pole. Empires stopped here. The world was divided not by politics, but by the immutable laws of physics. The sea was a fortress, protecting its secrets behind a barrier of cold and fog. The era of the explorer was ending. The era of the engineer was about to begin. Then came iron. It was more than a material. It was a revolution in physics. Railways collapsed distance. Time itself began to shrink, measured no longer in days, but in schedules. In the mid-19th century, the pulse of civilization accelerated. Industrial engineers and laborers hammered the backbone of a new era. Railway financiers and imperial advisors saw more than profit. They saw power, the ability to move armies and goods across land faster than any ship could sail the seas. Maps began to change. Rail lines stretched from London toward the heart of India. From Moscow, the Iron Road pushed relentlessly toward the Pacific. In America, the tracks carved a path from New York westward, stitching a continent together. The geography of the planet was being rewritten in steam and steel. For the first time in history, a dangerous idea became practical, a gamble of engineering necessity over natural barriers. The architects of this era did not just build paths, they built certainty. They calculated the structural resilience of an interconnected world. What if the continents were not merely explored, but physically joined, a single unbroken circuit of human ambition? We are the descendants of those who refuse to let distance dictate our limits. The Age of Iron didn't just move us, it connected the idea of humanity to the reality of the globe. In the 1890s, the world stood on the brink of a mythical connection. From St. Petersburg to Washington, a dream was forged in ink and iron. Russian engineers and American magnates gathered to draw blueprints for a continuous railway spanning from Europe to North America. The proposal was audacious, a bridge across the Bering Strait, bridging the divide between hemispheres for the first time. But the reception was cold. Too dangerous, they said, too expensive. The iron would snap in the Arctic winter. The plans were shelved. The grand vision was buried under the weight of caution and the dust of decades. Even today, we look at these maps and wonder if the 19th century was more courageous than our own. What if we had built it? Infrastructure is invisible until it's absent. We feel the lack of this railway in every ocean crossed and every flight taken. The builders failed not because they were wrong, but because they were early. In engineering, disaster is inevitable, but collapse is optional. The dream of a united world remains, and in the silence of history, that dream is eternal. By 1914, the world was connected by rail as never before. The dream of a bridge across the Bering Strait seemed almost inevitable. But then, the gears of civilization shifted. Steel, labor, and imagination were redirected toward a singular, devastating purpose: total war. Between 1914 and 1945, humanity chose the trench over the track. Railways became tools of destruction rather than connection. Railways, once symbols of unity, became the logistics of slaughter. Thousands of miles of track lay broken across the globe. The Bering Strait faded into the background, a footnote in a more violent century. The plans were filed away, gathering dust. The strait remained a barrier, a gap in the world's map that no one had the luxury or the courage to bridge. Yet the logic of the project remains, a testament to a civilizational gamble lost to time. Disaster is inevitable. Collapse is optional. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. The Bering Strait was a dream deferred by blood. Whether we reclaim that imagination remains the ultimate calculation. In this era, the Bering Strait represents human limitation. Civilizations expand aggressively, yet stop at nature's hardest boundary. The failure to build is as meaningful as any success. Act 1 establishes a critical truth. Humans migrate instinctively. Empires expand strategically. But true global unity requires technology, patience, and cooperation. The idea of connection predates the ability to execute it. Not every great project fails because it is impossible. Some fail because humanity is not yet ready to pay the price. I do not believe. I do not doubt. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. We look back not at the bridge that was built, but at the boundary that held. Survival is not just about strength, it is about care. What we choose to preserve defines who we believe ourselves to be. The wars ended, the ruins cooled, but peace did not arrive. Instead, the world hardened. A line is drawn across the globe, ideological, not physical. Two systems now stared at one another across continents. Capital and labor, market and command, freedom and control. The Bering Strait reappears on the map, no longer a curiosity, but a strategic fault line. In the Cold War, distance was no longer safety. Proximity became threat. Every move here resonated in the bunkers of power. Intelligence analysts pored over the white spaces of the map, looking for a shadow. Silence was the new language of war. History is a series of choices made under pressure. In 1947, the choice was to build walls where bridges were promised. I observe these moments not to judge the fear, but to measure the resilience. The strategic fault line remains, a reminder that in the cold of distance, we often lose sight of our shared horizon. Cut to black. Silence. Spacetime, 1950s, the Soviet Union, Siberia, a land that consumes time and ambition. The Soviet Union understood railways differently, not as commerce, as control. To rule the East, Moscow needed more than laws, it needed steel. Engineers and laborers hammer spikes in temperatures that shatter bone. Breath freezes instantly. Every inch of track was a victory over the impossible, a claim on a wilderness that refused to be tamed. Moscow needed permanence. In the taiga, roads dissolved into mud, rivers became walls of ice. Only the rail endured. It was the only umbilical cord connecting the heart of the Union to its frozen extremities. But beneath the snow lay a treacherous secret. Permafrost was not solid Earth. It was frozen time, a prehistoric trap waiting for the heat of human progress to trigger a collapse. A foreman hesitates as the ground shifts. The ideology of Moscow demanded stability, but nature offered only flux. Fear of failure was the greatest motivator. In the 1950s, a structural error was seen as a political betrayal. Ideological duty outweighed human cost. The railway was fed by the sweat of the Gulag and the pride of the party. They drove pilings into the deep frost, attempting to anchor their empire to the very foundation of the planet. Gravel embankments were raised like defensive walls against the thawing soil. A fortress made of stone and steel. Surveyors mapped the void, their measurements precise, their lives expendable. Moscow's eyes were everywhere. Relentless urgency. Every day without progress was a day the wilderness regained its ground. At night, the only sound was the cracking of the ice and the distant whistle of a ghost train. Moscow's observers did not believe in failure. They calculated progress in kilometers and disregarded the ghosts left behind. Decades later, the steel remains. Rusted, bent, but still there. A scar across the face of the permafrost. Disaster was inevitable, but collapse was optional. The structures remained even when the builders were gone. Symbolically, it was a gamble for eternity, a civilization betting its future on the permanence of ice. What we choose to preserve defines who we believe ourselves to be. We preserved the steel, but forgot the hands that laid it. I do not believe, I do not doubt, I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. The Siberian spine remains, a monument to an ambition that refused to thaw. Railways melt the land they touch. Steel absorbs heat, gravel traps warmth. And when permafrost melts, the ground collapses. Tracks warp, cars derail. Engineers argue, every kilometer eastward was an experiment. Failure was hidden, success was exaggerated. The rail line stops, still thousands of kilometers from the sea. The land reclaimed the dream. In the battle between steel and ice, the ice never truly loses. 1959, the edge of the world. Across the water, America watched. Alaska, once remote, was now a front line, a frozen shield in a divided world. The landscape was transforming. New airstrips, hidden bases, and silent watchers. U.S. Army engineers and civilian contractors worked alongside local indigenous guides. They were the architects of a secret geography, carving survival out of the ice. Construction actions, building supply routes, temporary rail spurs, the logistics of the impossible. Ice road logistics became the pulse of the North. Every mile was a gamble against the thaw. The U.S. did not dream of connection. It prepared for invasion. 85 kilometers. That's all that separates us from the other side. A general looks across the strait. He knows how thin the line truly is. Technological rivalry. Every signal captured was a move in a global game of chess. Disaster was inevitable. The ground itself was an enemy, frozen solid for 10,000 years. Collapse was optional. They built for eternity, knowing the ice would try to reclaim it all. Survival was not about strength. It was about care. The care of every weld, every bolt, every man. Under the northern lights, the watch continued, a silent vigil in the deep cold. The idea of connection predates the ability to execute it. Here, connection was a lifeline. Some projects fail because humanity is not yet ready to pay the price. Alaska demanded everything. Successful infrastructure becomes invisible until it is absent. Today, these sites are ghosts. The builders shaped the future more than the rulers who gave the orders. They left a legacy of resilience. Symbolically, this was the moment we learned that the world is smaller than it seems. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. I see the moments when civilizations gambled everything on an idea. Alaska was more than a front line. It was a testament to the fact that while disaster may be inevitable, collapse is always optional. Cut to black. Early 1960s, while the world looked to the stars, a different ambition was brewing beneath the ice of the Bering Strait. Inside a closed chamber, engineers and military minds gathered. They weren't planning a bridge, but a tunnel. An invisible corridor, protected from the Arctic storms and hidden from the prying eyes of Western satellites. But logic was soon eclipsed by strategic temptation. The goal began to shift from connection to conquest. A military official interrupted the briefing with a chilling realization. If we can send trains, we can send tanks. The engineering triumph had become a weapon. The tunnel was no longer just a road, it was a threat. Silence filled the room. The Bering project was a gamble on a future that the Cold War world could not afford. The idea of connection predates our ability to execute it. Some projects fail because we aren't ready for the price. I observe and reconstruct. Survival is about care, not just conquest. The invisible corridor remains a ghost of our ambition. Cut to black. The engineers solved geology, they did not solve politics. Tectonic shifts and ice scouring the seabed were identified as hurdles, but the real walls were invisible. Distrust and nuclear paranoia turned the strait into a moat. A tunnel connects land, but it also connects enemies. The plans were sealed, locked away by the very nations that dreamed them. The Bering Strait became a militarized silence. History paused for physics. No construction happens by design. Ambition was frozen by uncertainty. A bridge is more than engineering. It is a choice. And in the Arctic, trust was the only resource we couldn't find. Cut to black. Silence. Space, time, 1989, Berlin, Moscow, Siberia, empires dissolve faster than ice. The Cold War ends not with conquest, but exhaustion. A silence falls over the world's largest landmass. In the abandoned rail yards of the East, the machines of state stand frozen. The great projects of the past seem like relics of a dead era. But beneath the dust, time, mid-1990s, global financial centers, Tokyo, Beijing, New York, Moscow. When the Cold War ended, humanity did not celebrate unity. It pursued efficiency. A new map overlays the old ideological divide. Not red versus blue, but cost versus distance. Goods moved faster than people. Capital moved faster than goods. 90% of global manufacturing, 2/3 of global consumption, separated by ice. The world felt inefficient. The question of the strait returns not as a dream, but as a calculation. Impatience, competitive anxiety, a renewed hunger for scale. The calculation is simple. The execution is everything. I do not believe. I do not doubt. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. The world was divided not by politics, but by physics, and we are still calculating the bridge. Space, time, late 1990s, the Bering Strait. Before steel could return, knowledge had to be rebuilt. International teams gathered to touch the true foundation of the project. Cores emerged, layers of sediment and ancient rock. The strait was not empty, it was unstable. Technical mapping revealed active fault lines and moving ice acting like bulldozers. There was a growing respect for this geological violence. This isn't a place you conquer, it's a place you negotiate with. By 1999, the picture was complete. The bridge was built in the mind long before the first stone was laid. I do not believe. I do not doubt. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. The strait was not conquered. It was understood. Cut to black. Every option failed until examined long enough. Space, time, early 2000s. An international consortium gathered to bridge the final gap. The task was to defy physics. 3 models rotated: a massive bridge, a submerged tunnel, and a bored, deep tunnel. The bridge was a monument to connection, but the Bering Strait is a grinding machine, symbolically an era of ambition. Structural performance, failure. The pressure of the ice was a constant, a machine of frozen time, a compromise between sky and bedrock, floating in the current, tethered by steel. Engineeringly, a risk. Engineering logic. The currents are unpredictable. A structure that breathes with the tide eventually fatigues. The consortium moved deeper. The bored deep tunnel, 100 kilometers of solid rock, the ultimate engineering adaptation. No ice, no tide, only weight. The strategic fault line. Permafrost was not Earth, it was frozen time. The friction promised a heat no system could manage. Message for the modern world. Some projects fail because humanity is not ready to pay the price. Failure is as meaningful as success. The world was divided not by politics, but by physics. Every chapter of the report ended in the same behavior: collapse. They sought a material that did not exist, resilience that outlived the builders. Disaster is inevitable. Collapse is optional. Railways melt the land they touch. To connect Alaska to Siberia is to negotiate with a landscape that refuses to stay solid. The idea of connection predates the ability to execute it. We are the architects of eternity, building monuments to what might have been. In the dark of the deep tunnel, silence was absolute. A logic that required a gamble no one was willing to take. Every design was a compromise. Every compromise was a flaw. The engineering logic was sound, the reality was not. The Eurotunnel succeeded because the ground was kind. Beringia is a different god entirely, a different scale. The permafrost was a barrier of frozen time. We did not build because we could not endure the environment. Emotions, pressure, decisions. The cost was the risk of failure, a failure that would echo for a century. As the climate shifts, the necessity of a bridge fades as the ocean opens, the window of engineering closed. I observe, I calculate, I reconstruct. The Bering crossing remains a ghost, a connection that was impossible until it wasn't. I do not believe, I do not doubt. I observe the moments when civilizations gamble everything on an idea. The Bering Project was the last great gamble. We are still waiting for the next. Cut to black. Silence. Space, time, the Bering Strait, a project defined by physics and failure. Chapter 1, the engineering gamble. The idea of connection predates the ability to execute it. Suspension spans. To bridge this gap, engineers had to account for structural performance never before tested in these latitudes. Structural logic. The bridge would have to stand against forces that do not recognize human ambition. A bridge would stand against moving ice thicker than buildings, churning with the weight of an entire ocean's pressure. Ice load simulations, construction concepts. The pressure exceeds the yield strength of any known maritime concrete. Ice simulations crush virtual pylons. The math was consistent. The materials would fail before the ice did. Wind stress tests. The bridge would stand against winds exceeding aircraft limits. Constant, relentless. Structural behavior. Harmonic resonance would tear the spans apart long before the ice reached them. The bridge would stand against darkness half the year. Engineering logic. Maintenance is a fantasy in a world without light. Act 1, climax. The bridge would not collapse once, it would collapse repeatedly. Disaster is inevitable. Every simulation, every adaptation led to the same outcome. Physics does not negotiate. Decision, abandoned. The world was divided not by politics, but by physics. Symbolically, the path remained closed. I do not believe. I do not doubt. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. I see moments when civilizations gambled everything on an idea. Some projects fail because humanity is not yet ready to pay the price. The failure to build is as meaningful as any success. Cut to black. Space. Time. Same chamber, weeks later. The plotting began not with words, but with geometry. Depth calculations revealed the true scale of the gamble. The pressure of the ocean met the weight of human ambition. Ventilation modeling followed. In a tunnel this long, the air itself becomes a structural requirement. The answer lay beneath the violence, below the ice, below the seabed, below politics. The final choice, a deep-bored twin-tunnel railway. A design inspired by the Channel Tunnel, but reimagined for the absolute isolation of the North. Longer, colder, and more isolated than anything humanity had ever dared to connect. Silence. Then, the weight of consensus. The engineers had solved the geology. Now the people had to solve the history. For the first time in history, the decision is multinational, a shared calculation for a shared future. The line is drawn straight through the earth. It is no longer a dream, it is a trajectory. Preparation began. The TBMs were not just machines, they were the teeth of a civilization reclaiming its connection. Structural performance was calculated against every failure. To build here is to negotiate with time itself. The melted path, a corridor of heat and steel through the permafrost. Frozen time, met by constant motion. If we can send trains, we can send hope. If we can send hope, we can survive the cold. The strategic fault line has been crossed. The bridge of empires is no longer a ghost of the past. I do not believe, I do not doubt, I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. The decision is made, cut to black. Eastern Siberia, 2005 to 2015. A land where the earth itself is a shifting, frozen relic of time. The mission was to upgrade the lifeline. In this terrain, progress is measured in inches. Every bolt is a battle. Without the steel, the mountain simply takes back what was stolen. We re-engineered a continent, installing thermal siphons to guard the track. The ground became a negotiation between ice and heat. The land never sleeps. Under the midnight sun, the isolation is absolute. But as long as the trains move, neither do we. The engineering solved the geology. It turned a frozen barrier into a path for the future, one siphon at a time. I am an observer from a time where these tracks are ancient history. But even now, we remember, collapse is optional. Building is a choice. Western Alaska. a frontier defined not by miles, but by the resilience of the permafrost. Here, the logic of steel met the wisdom of the earth. Negotiating land access wasn't just a legal hurdle, it was a spiritual one. Alaska demanded compromise. Steel could not ignore tradition. Environmental regulators marked the invisible boundaries. To build the crossing, we had to learn the language of the tundra. Constructing through tundra meant understanding that the ground was frozen time, shifting with every degree of change. The answer was a structural adaptation, a bridge for the land. Wildlife migration corridors became the engineering priority. Progress is only possible when the land allows it. We no longer dream of connection. We execute it with respect. When we build with care, we don't just move goods, we move time. Alaska taught us that the strongest bridge isn't made of steel, but of compromise, cut to black. By the late 2010s, the gamble moved from theory to heavy industry. On both sides of the strait, the earth began to open. These machines were assembled piece by piece. Their cutter heads were larger than buildings, designed for absolute, unyielding endurance. The crews knew the stakes. Every meter was measured, every vibration recorded. The earth was now a data set to be managed. Maintaining pressure was the invisible war. To prevent collapse, the machine had to push back as hard as the earth pushed in. The machines were not powerful in the way we understand speed. They were patient. They ground down the world, grain by grain. In the end, it was not the strength of steel that prevailed. It was the patience of the mind that built it. They left behind a corridor that defied the map, a connection that physics had once forbidden. The machines were not powerful. They were patient, and in their patience, they rewrote the geography of human ambition, cut to black. Space, time, mid-construction, miles beneath the surface, we carve through the silence of the earth, a calculation of steel against stone. The earth does not surrender quietly. An unexpected fault zone, seawater intrusion. The machine is silenced. Panic must be contained. Rapid calculation. Lives are at risk. We do not conquer this place. We negotiate with it. Engineers reroute, reinforce, and resume. Progress is not speed. It is the ability to stand still when the world is moving, and then move forward anyway. It is persistence. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. The earth does not give us its secrets for free. We pay for them in steel, in sweat, and in the refusal to stop. Success is found in the adaptation to failure. Progress is not speed, it is persistence. Space, time, years later, deep beneath the seabed. Maintenance crews work in the silence of the deep. Sensors pulse. Machines operate alone in the darkness. For years, nothing visible happens. No ceremony, no headlines. Steel rings click into place. History is being assembled in the dark. The world above remains unaware of the calculation beneath its feet. Construction is not a performance, it is a negotiation with physics. The permafrost was not solid earth, it was frozen time. The machines were not powerful, they were patient. A new map overlays the old ideological divide, not red versus blue, but cost versus distance. The invisible corridor connects more than land, it connects futures. Structural logic demands precision. Failure to build is as meaningful as success. Disaster is inevitable. Collapse is optional. Survival is about care. I do not believe. I do not doubt. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. History is built in the dark so that we may live in the light. Cut to black. Space-time. For millennia, the strait was a barrier of water and ice. Today, it becomes a bridge of steel and will. Final year of excavation. After decades of planning, we reach the endgame. Two tunnel-boring machines approach from opposite sides of the world. Each carries the weight of a continent's ambition. Alignment error tolerance, less than a hand's width. One mistake, and the machines miss each other in the dark. Beneath 50 meters of Arctic water, the pressure is immense. The geology, unforgiving. Distance bored, over 80 kilometers. A marathon through solid rock. Now only a few meters of stone remain, the culmination of a century of dreams. The cutter heads touch. The barrier dissolves. Stop. The machines have done their work. Silence. In the dark, 80 kilometers of hollowed earth hold its breath. Cheers break out. Relief, awe, quiet pride. The world has changed. For the first time since the Ice Age, the ancient connection is restored. Asia and North America are connected, no longer by chance, but by human design. Space-time, early 2030s. Deep beneath the Bering Strait, the tunnel walls gleam under artificial light. Cables snake along concrete ribs. Sensors blink in quiet rhythm. Construction actions, installing final lining segments. The lining is the skin of the structure, protecting it from the weight of the sea. Pressure testing bulkheads. activating seismic dampers. The tunnel is no longer being carved, it is being sealed, like a wound that must never reopen. Engineers listen to the hum of air circulation systems. The atmosphere inside is now entirely artificial. Tension replaces excitement. Every system must survive decades without sunlight. Failure now would not be dramatic, it would be silent. Physics does not forgive. The ocean is a patient adversary. What began as a geopolitical dream is now a concrete reality. The crews who carved this path are the first to be forgotten once the gates close. The AI monitors every microfracture, every shift in the seabed. The final connection is made. The Bridge of Empires is complete. One last walk through the silence before the first trains arrive. History is assembled in the dark. Now it is time to observe. Excavation is violence. Completion is restraint. Space, time, same period. Tunnel control centers, Alaska and Siberia. A tunnel this long is not infrastructure, it is an organism. Massive fans engage, air begins to flow. It must breathe. It must regulate its temperature. It must survive disaster without panic. A simulated fire drill begins. The tunnel will forgive no assumptions. In the dark, beneath the ice, the calculation never stops. Resilience is the only variable that matters. Cut to black. Silence. Space. Time. The final year. The dream of a connected world is no longer just a blueprint. It is now a physical, breathing reality. Diesel cannot breathe here. At these depths, beneath the seabed, the traditional engines of the 20th century find no purchase. Electricity becomes the only acceptable force. A clean, silent power that leaves no poison behind in the deep reaches. Energy flows from two continents into one continuous system. It is the greatest electrical handshake in human history. The pressure is immense. To link the world's largest economies is to accept responsibility for their collective stability. The strait was once a moat. Now it is a bridge of light. We have synchronized the world, finding a way to thrive in the silence. Space, time, inside the tunnel, months before opening. Deep beneath the Bering Strait, time feels compressed. The pressure of the sea above is matched by the pressure of the deadline. Characters and groups move with the grace of a specialized ecosystem, track-laying crews and robotic alignment systems. Precision is not a goal here, it is a requirement. Robotic systems guide every movement. Rails are not laid, they are tuned, like strings on an instrument of trade. Lasers align steel to millimeter accuracy. Across thousands of miles, there is no room for drift. The materials used are forged for eternity, high-tensile steel, capable of withstanding the weight of continents. Continuous welds provide thermal stability. The steel must not breathe, even as the Earth shifts. Vibration-absorbing mounts isolate the structure from the violence of motion. Elastomer supports and shock-isolated fasteners ensure the tunnel remains a sanctuary of stability. At high speed, imperfection becomes violence. The physics of speed demand perfection. In the constant cold of the seabed, thermal expansion is the enemy of the weld. A worker wipes sweat in a place colder than winter, a paradox of human effort. Quiet obsession, craftsmanship under exhaustion. This is the human cost of connection. Every millimeter is a negotiation with the Earth's resistance. Every bolt is a decision. This rail must last longer than us. We are building for a future we will not see. The engineering logic was sound. The geology was the variable we had to solve. The Earth does not surrender quietly. It pushes back with the weight of the Pacific. The world was divided not by politics, but by physics. The strait was a moat of ice. From the Siberian spine to the Alaskan front, the calculation was distance versus cost. Alaska demanded compromise. Steel could not ignore tradition. We re-engineered the future. The machines were not powerful. They were patient. They understood the scale of time. History is being assembled in the dark. We are rebuilding knowledge lost to the cold. Structural performance is the only metric that matters. Collapse is optional. Resistance is mandatory. Successful infrastructure becomes invisible until absent. This tunnel is now the pulse of the world. Some projects fail because humanity is not ready. Others succeed because they have no choice. I observe, I calculate, I reconstruct, the results are final. I do not believe. I do not doubt. I simply record the moment when steel became the bridge between worlds. Progress is not measured in speed, but in the persistence to build where the Earth says no. In the dark, we find our structure. Cut to black. Silence. Space. Time. Weeks before the public opening. We are inside the tunnel. The first crossing carries no humans. Trust is earned, not granted. This is not a journey of exploration. It is a calculation of physics. Every vibration is measured. Every expansion of the steel is observed. Gradual acceleration begins. The machines do not feel anticipation. They only follow the logic of the algorithm. The train disappears into the darkness. Between two worlds, there is only the silence of the seabed and the pressure of the Earth. Minutes pass, then hours. Above, the ice remains indifferent. Below, the connection is finally being forged after decades of stalemate. Thermal expansion observation. The tunnel is a living organism. It breathes, shifts, and resists. We must observe its every movement. In the control rooms, the tension is a physical weight. But here, celebration is postponed. Relief is a luxury for those who do not understand the stakes. It emerges on the opposite continent, Asia and North America, connected by human design for the first time since the Ice Age. One success is an accident. 10,000 are proof. We do not celebrate the connection. We celebrate the predictability of the steel. The crossing is open, not because we dreamed it, but because we calculated it. Civilization is no longer divided by physics. It is only divided by choice. Space, time, opening day. Rail terminals in Siberia and Alaska are finally joined. 2 points on a map, joined by steel and calculation. There is a crowd, but no celebration. There is no parade, no triumphal speeches. A train waits, doors open. Passengers board, the architects and laborers. This is not conquest, it is acceptance. Inside there is only quiet awe, the pressure of history settling into the upholstery. My grandparents crossed this land on foot, she thinks. The ice was their only bridge. I cross it beneath the sea. The geography hasn't changed, only our relationship to it. Asia and North America, connected by human design for the first time since the Ice Age. Emerging into the east, the sun rises over a land that was once a dead end. I observe, calculate, and reconstruct. The bridge is no longer a dream. It is a calculation. The tunnel will forgive no assumptions. Silence. Space, time inside the tunnel. During the first passenger run, there's nothing to see, only motion. The train hums smoothly. The most important journeys rarely announce themselves. After hours, light returns. Applause is muted. Some cry silently. Years have passed since the first rails were laid across the strait. What was once a civilizational gamble has become mundane. Freight flows seamlessly now. Logistics companies no longer calculate in weeks, but in hours. The pulse of trade is constant. Urban planners have adjusted. Cities that once faced inward now orient themselves toward these new arteries of steel and data. Cultural exchange is no longer a milestone. It is an environment. A new generation moves between worlds as easily as crossing a street. Migrants and travelers bring new languages and perspectives, weaving a tapestry that the old maps never anticipated. The extraordinary has faded into the background. The bridge is no longer a wonder of the world, it is simply the way things are. Space and time have been compressed. The distance hasn't changed, but our relationship to it has. Distance collapses quietly. Asia and North America are no longer separated by water, but connected by routine. The tunnel did not erase borders. It did not erase inequality. It required compromise. It displaced traditions. It demanded constant vigilance. A maintenance crew works silently years later. Connection is not an ending. It is a responsibility. Space, time. 2 centuries ago, this line was a barrier. Today, it is a pulse. The Intercontinental Railway. 80 kilometers of steel and engineering precision beneath the Bering Sea. It is not just a tunnel. It is an organism that breathes, regulates, and connects. Distance has been re-engineered. Isolation has been calculated out of the equation. Humans once crossed this place because the world was frozen. Later, they refused to cross it because they were afraid. Finally, they crossed it because they understood one truth. Isolation is more dangerous than effort. The Earth rotates, the tunnel is invisible, but its effect is not. The Intercontinental Railway is not humanity's greatest structure. It is proof that humanity learned when not to stop.
The railway symbolizes mature civilization, not spectacle, but endurance. It is buried, cooperative, and deliberately restrained. It redefined global logistics, shifting geopolitical thinking from control to continuity. It established engineering as a tool of peace rather than dominance. The future is not built by those who conquer nature, but by those who learn how to live inside it. Symbolically, civilization ally, silence.